Welcome to Corporate Entrepreneurs. I am your host, Sam Bracamontes. Joining us today for the second time, the first time we had a bit of a technical difficulties, which is part of being an entrepreneur, right? So Everything comes full circle. Anthony Pullen. Anthony, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Sam.
Again, listen, for those of you listening, I want to say that aligning the schedule of two suppliers is hard enough. When there are wrenches thrown into the system, it's even harder. So, honestly, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for sharing your insights. And, again, sorry about the technical difficulties the first time. So we kind of talked about the run of show for the podcast. I'd love for you to introduce yourself, talk about your journey and how you got into your current role.
Yeah, so I'll do the quick one because I know we've only got like 45 minutes. But so my name's Anthony. By the sound of my voice, you're probably aware that I'm not from around these parts. I was born in just outside of London, England. And that's kind of where I first started getting into the service industry. There's a place called Chatham, which is just kind of on the Thames estuary there. And my first experience kind of in the trade, I guess, was, cleaning up cigarette butts and glasses. A lot of people probably share the same story, an old workingman's pub where my dad used to drink. And really that meant nothing to me. I went to university. I studied pharmaceutical science. And when I graduated with my master's, in fact, while I was at university, I was having to bartend because, going to university in London was not cheap.
Right.
And, I had to work as well as study, and working in a bar was an easy option because it was happening in the evening. Mm-hmm. And I really fell in love with hospitality at that point. And that was one of the things that got me into flair bartending, and that will come into play shortly. But when I graduated, I started working for a company called Procter Gamble, and they put a white lab coat on me, and I was running stability tests for different boards of health for the pharmaceutical products that they were producing around the world. So, I was looking after NyQuil, Meta-Nite, things like cough medicines and stuff like this. And a very small cog in a massive, massive wheel. But I was stuck in a cubicle running HPLC, stability tests, day in, day out, surrounded by people that hated their job. And I was like, I don't want to be this person anymore. So I was still bartending at the time. And at the time I was getting into flair bartending competitions, and I was doing pretty good. And I got the opportunity to move to Amsterdam. So I quit my job. This is madness when I think back. I quit my job. I gave up the 401k, got rid of the shares, everything. I'd only had it for a year and a half. And if you understand anything about getting a job at Procter Gamble, they put you through the wash to get there. I mean, they were pulling people from all over different universities and stuff. And they only employ 100 people or so a year in that division. And they were very, very, selective of who they bring in, and rightfully so, because they only recruit from within. So you can't get you can't go in as a VP at Procter. You have to do the time. It's almost like a union, so to speak. So anyway, I called my mom and I'm like, Mom, I'm leaving. And she was distraught. I'm the only person in my family that's kind of done the higher education and gone to university and stuff. And she was the proudest, mom on the estate, look at my boy and everything else. She didn't speak to me for like a month. I moved to Amsterdam, and I had a friend who I helped get a bar job in London, and he returned the favor. And I remember one night sleeping on his kitchen floor after working a 13-hour shift in a gay bar in the red light district called the Arc. And the only place I could work was dispense because I didn't speak the language at that point. So I remember thinking I've made a massive, massive mistake. And if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to commit. So I really started drilling into flair because I was, for me, that was kind of the pinnacle of hospitality, really elevating a guest experience. Okay. And I'm, flair in Europe is very different to flair in the United States. Okay. So it was seen as a kind of an art form. So after a few years of practice, I came to the US and I did a competition. And there was this crazy casino owner, or a bar owner inside a casino. And he's like, do you remember Kahunaville? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he owned that place. I came and did a competition in Kahunaville. I did pretty good. And I got kind of pulled into the back office. I was like, hey, we're opening this new concept. Would you be interested? I was like, yeah, whatever kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
It's never going to happen. So, spent some time with my now wife traveling around the US. And sure enough, when we got back to Europe, the lawyers contacted and said, "Hey, do you want to take this on seriously?" That was just after I won the Havana Club World Grand Prix as well. So I managed to get what's called an O1 visa, which is it's cool because when I sent it back to my mom and said, "Hey, listen, things have changed. I'm now an alien of extraordinary ability," not my title, theirs. And so I had the opportunity to come and work, and that's what got me into Las Vegas. During that time, I was also working as a brand ambassador for Bols. Bols Geneva was launched in the US. I had worked for the Bols company in the Netherlands when I was there, the Bols Bartending Academy.
Okay.
Helping do the trainings, and I was a head bartender at the Mirror Bar there. And so really the trade thing started to take off from there. Nobody knew what Geneva was. I didn't have any experience being a brand ambassador. I just spoke a little bit of Dutch, and it was a spirit category that, and I'll get into this, I guess a little bit later, but it was a spirit category that nobody knew anything about it.
Right.
And it just kind of fell on my lap, and I just took full advantage of it from there. And then,
what year was this?
So this was 2010.
Okay.
Yeah, 2010 when I first got here. And so Geneva launched in like 2009, and then on the West Coast it started picking up. So I was running to LA and doing some educational stuff, mainly with the distributor, trying to help sales teams understand what the hell this stuff is. Is it kind of like a gin? Is it like a whiskey? It's a complicated spirit, especially if it's not part of your culture.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time doing that, built a team of ambassadors around me, and as the company grew and we took control of the liqueurs, I got to do more brand work. I was exposed to more brand work. I then made the switch to Bulldog Gin just before it was acquired by Campari, and I was tasked with helping grow the on-premise to meet the acquisition requirements. I then transferred over to Campari just prior to the acquisition of Bulldog Gin and helped build out the on-premise team across the US. We had 40 on-premise specialists around the US, and my responsibility was to give them their sales training and make sure that they were educated on the brand, and then working with the brand teams to make sure that the programs that they were expecting to execute made sense. So I did that for 2 years, and then made a switch to my current role with Q Mixers, and so now it's just gone from there. So I guess that's the short version. So.
On the that's a lot of experience, and I think, listen, I've had numbers of guests that I think there's always something that happens in our trajectory of our life, in our career. I think that taking on that competition. Nate Green was just here. He talked about how winning competitions really put him out there, and the opportunity sort of came after that. I think that was probably key, right? Like, you come in here and doing that competition and getting that opportunity to then, continue working, obviously, and growing, and, what your role has been in the States. I think something that I love for you to share is, you worked for a spirits brand, right? Amaro, right? With Campari, and now you're on the non-alcoholic, mixer side. In your opinion, what are the biggest differences? If there's a young and up and coming bartender up there that wants to jump on the brand ambassador side, that maybe has the opportunity because he's created a name for himself to go, one versus the other. What would you say are the biggest differences between those three?
This is something that I'm experiencing now. The differences are not defined, and there's quite a lot of crossover. I think if you're asking yourself, what should I do, non-alc or spirit, I wouldn't have a clear answer for you. But I think when you think about my trajectory, I've always been a gin fan, right? The Geneva, the Bulldog, into now I'm working for a tonic company. And, you have to love what you do, and you have to be confident in what you're talking about. Yeah. So it was a natural progression for me to go into, Q is a mixer brand, but the tonic is its flagship, was the first flavor. Gotcha. Now, on the day-to-day, it's very different. And I'll touch on that shortly. But if you're asking yourself, which one should I do? I really think, I'm a firm believer of doing the job before you get the job. So if you're passionate about something, do that and stick to it and be good at it. Train yourself to do it. And it's easier said than done. But if you're, for me, it was a very natural progression into non-alc. Now,
that makes sense.
The difference is striking. So our company operates as a liquor company on one side of the channel, and then a pure consumer goods company on the other side. So we have separate divisions that handle grocery and retail. Those we do that handle the on-premise. So a lot of our on-premise volume is done through our third-party distributors, that classically alcohol, because people are consuming it that way.
Right.
In a bar, the sales of tonic, of people just drinking tonic, is pretty small. Same thing could be said for ginger beer. Same thing could be said for grapefruit. The differences and the challenges is, if you're working for a gin or an Amari, right? There's so many different options of gins and Amaris that are out there, and it's already been premiumized. So when you're talking about a premium brand, you're really just trying to figure out what's missing in the operator's program and where your gin or your spirit that you're selling would fit. But they're used to having multiple versions of the same thing, essentially.
Right.
So the selling process can be very quick in the big picture. It still takes a while to get a placement and a menu and stuff, of course. But if you sell it the right way, it will find its place naturally onto a menu or onto the back bar, and it's going to be a premium pour. That's good. With the mixers, there's a couple of different challenges. One is the selling process is very long, because it's not a conversation that people are used to having, right? Tonic's just tonic. It comes off the gun. There's nothing more to it. Where am I going to put this stuff? Do I need fridge space? That means I have to take some beer away. And it's also, let's be honest, so far down the list of priorities when you're opening a new spot. It's like, I'll get to it later. So when I first started with Q, and it was as a consultant here in Las Vegas, I was like, am I doing something wrong? I mean, what's going on here? And everyone around me was like, no, get used to it. This is going to be a long, long sale. But when you do bring it in, the volume is insane.
Correct.
So it's cases and cases and cases.
Right.
Which I wasn't used to. I was like, whoa, this is like torch paper. And, obviously it's a competitive landscape, but it's still in its infancy. It's going to get more competitive. But it's just a very different sales cycle. And legally, we can do different things as well.
Right. Yeah. The legalities of non-alcoholic. I like what you just said right now. I mean, I think that as a consumer palate continues to change and evolve, and again, I've said this a few times, that premiumization is not really a trend anymore. It's just, this is the norm,
standard. And the same thing could be said about craft cocktails.
Very true.
It's exciting to see, and one of the last, and this is one of the reasons I took the role with Q, is because I want to see progression in the industry, right? The thought of being able to change the way people are consuming alcohol in a country like the US that's a very nice thing to be able to say. So, and having a hand in that is going to be great. And I'll be very proud if we can do it. But if you think about, when I go back to working behind the bar, there used to be like well, cool, and then premium. The whole well thing's gone. Like, everything's cool, right? Yeah. And everyone's used to being upsold. Do you want a double? Do you want this? Do you want this brand? But and the same thing can be said for wine. Same thing could be said for beer. But it hasn't happened in the mixer category yet. There's a few places that take pride in it, but it's not as ubiquitous. It's not as, like, the consumers are not going in and saying, no, I don't want that from the gun. I want a decent ginger beer, or I want a decent mixer. But I believe that's starting to change, and there's a lot of good people out there working for a lot of different companies that are leading that charge. And it's so good to see, because really consumers aren't dumb. They want value for their money, and they're willing to pay for it if you give them a good proposition.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and there's the opportunity for the venue to then capitalize on, providing quality, and also, charging a little bit more for that quality, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we've been working with a lot of big national account partners, and the proposition is this: to say, listen, probably 30% of your drinks that you're selling is going to be, if not more, like a vodka soda, or a very simple mixed drink, a vodka tonic, or even a mule, a very basic mule. So if 30% of your revenue is coming from that, and you could just maybe upcharge, an optional upcharge. $1-2 here and there, for you want a nice one with a nice mixer, you're gonna make money.
For sure.
People are used to being that done. Now, operationally, it's a bit of a pain, no doubt about that. You've got to have to train staff, and you're gonna have to put incentives in things to move the needle. But it is there. It's proven to be there. So
and even on the staff level, I feel like, not necessarily going too deep into this, but even on the staff level is, can you sell that same mule for this price? Yeah, but when you upsell it with this mixer, this brand, you have a higher check average, thus for a higher tip average. So, at the end of the day, everybody wins.
Yeah. I mean, nobody's going to be disappointed as long as the quality of the drink is good, right?
Correct.
That's what let's get down to. Don't rip people off, but
Yeah, and I think, again, going back to if there's a young and up and coming a bartender that wants to come onto this role, I think you touched on something that is so true. And I was thinking about my example, as far as you were always a gin fan, right? Like, so being Mexican, I went to Mexico to visit my grandparents. My grandfather had a huge, huge impact on me as a child. I mean, as a father figure, right? He drank tequila, and he would tell me about this plan, and like there was some family members in other states that made something like tequila. So when I was a busser at Palms, and I went on to, I was actually a stalker first for the buffet. When somebody called off, they asked, as soon as I turned to the one, hey, do you want to cover this bar back shift? And I said, sure. And the only thing I could talk to people about was tequila. So on my first brand ambassador position, the natural thing, to your point, was to go after that category, because it was one thing that I held special, one thing that I knew about, and something that, again, because of my culture, it became so natural, right?
Yeah.
Fast forward a few years later, I visited a whiskey distillery, and the smell just, and like I could, if I close my eyes, I could go back to that place. That's when I fell in love with whiskey. And again, obviously those that know my current role, but I mean, to your point, I mean, there could be a progression, but at the end of the day, listen, like, if you take on this role as a supplier, as a, young ambassador, junior ambassador, whatever it is, just ask yourself, do you really see yourself waking up in the morning and being happy to represent and sell this brand, right? I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for sure.
Yeah, if you're passionate about something, it's a lot easier to do the job, because it is a job and it's going to be a lot of work. Yeah. So you have to have something extra than a paycheck or a KPI that you're chasing. It has to come from a deeper place, and that's what's going to help you be successful as well.
Yeah, I think it also starts, when we're at the bar and chef has that one special. If we like that special, is the one that we're pushing out there. If we don't, I mean, managers, you might want to plug your ears, but if you don't like that special, you're more than likely don't even bring it up.
That's a great example.
Yeah. So now on the trade marketing side, can you go into a little bit more detail as to what goes into that specific role, and how is that different from, again, you've done on-premise focus, you've done well, I guess all channel focus, but what trade marketing, what is it, and what is the role of trade marketing in the big aspect of the business?
Okay, so my title is trade marketing, but I am by far a traditional trade marketer, so to speak, and it kind of makes sense because we're working in a category that hasn't been defined on like how to go to market. We're still figuring it out. From my experience, like a basic rundown of the difference between trade marketing, traditional marketing, and sales is think of it as the go-between, right? So trade marketers tend to be great salespeople, but they're able to take brand programs and adapt them to what exactly the operators work. So it's more of a B2B than it is a B2C. Classic brand.
So for those of you that are listening, business to business, not business to consumer.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks. I'm going to use a lot of analogies.
Yeah. I know. We love. Yeah.
You should do an analogy dictionary.
Yeah, I know. So that's actually one of the ideas. Spoiler alert! I want to do a supplier dictionary.
Yeah. I remember. I digress. I had very early on in my career, I think it was the first brand position I had with Bowls, and everyone kept talking about O&D, and I had absolutely no idea. And I was in meetings, and I was like, well, I'll just pretend I know. And it wasn't until like I got my feet under the table and I was confident enough to ask the question, like, what the hell's O&D? And they're like, October, November, December. Like, end of year. Okay, review. But I mean, so anyone out there that's just getting started, don't be afraid if you don't know
just
something.
Ask.
Yeah, just ask. Don't try and fake it. Just ask. Most of the time, people are going to help. But anyway, where were we? Traditional trade marketing versus marketing and brand. So a lot of the brand stuff will go directly to consumer. Now, what we are challenged with as trade marketers is how do we educate the trade to tell the story of our brand over that table or over that 5 foot of mahogany or in another setting, and that requires a little bit more of an operational mindset, but also, and this is on premise trade marketing, which is what I'm doing. So there's trade marketing for for retail as well. And so that's the unique challenge there. And it's something that I love because it keeps me out of an office and not in front of a PowerPoint and keeps me in the market and alive, and it's where I love to be. But yeah, the difference is your business to business, but you're also trying to take a message of the brand and amplify it through other people. So it takes, how do you make this massive brand story become a elevator pitch or a 5-second interaction, and what kind of training and what kind of materials and what kind of programming are we putting in place to help that transition? Because really, if you look at it, our sales teams and our distributors, they're doing a lot of the selling, right? They're opening new accounts. They do lots of other stuff as well, but their primary focus is making sure the product is available, making sure it's at the right price, and making sure people have access to it, right?
Correct.
So they know where to order it from. And then you've got the sell-through, which is all about raising awareness. That could be as easy as getting it on print on a menu, or it could be doing some sort of promo or a poster or something,
right? Or
a rail map even. And then you've got activation. So these are the events that you throw, the spends, the tactical kind of interactions you have. It could also be as simple as a training. And then the holy grail is really advocacy. So when the people in that business are very proud of the fact that they're pouring your product,
right,
and they're really amplifying your message, and now you've got 5 voices instead of 1. That's what you're trying to look to do. So that's on-premise trade marketing as a nutshell. It's trying to move that needle from just being another bottle on the back bar to being something that people are talking about, and that will drive demand in the retail ultimately.
Do you think that that's a natural progression for a brand ambassador to sort of go into? Because I feel that the joke in our field is marketing doesn't necessarily look at ROI, right? Like marketing is thinking of building a brand for, a legacy brand for the next, 50, 100, they're doing those sort of long terms. I mean, obviously everything is geared to drive cases, but it's different. Sales is looking at the bottom line. How many cases, right, are we actually doing? So I feel like trade marketing, you're dancing in between both. And again, I feel that, brand ambassadors, district managers, whatever it is that, brands or companies want to call us, we're really in that, and we should think of ourselves in that sort of middle portion where you are creating brand awareness, you are, building brand loyalty, but also at the end of the day, like nobody gets paid if cases don't move, right?
Yeah, you need an engine, you need a fuel you need a fuel to fuel the engine. So again, back to my point, I don't think there is a traditional way. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've done, I've kind of fallen into. People say, oh, you're so lucky. I was like, well, wait, I had to be in the right room at the right time. Of course. And I was in a lot of rooms at a lot of times to make those things happen, right? So there's no like lightning moment really. You just have to be everywhere all the time. And that's a grind. And a lot of the time that's, sacrifice on yourself, on your family, but so long as you have purpose every time you walk into those rooms or into those meetings, you're going to do all right. And if you have passion, that's another thing as well. So to answer the question, I don't think you should see it as, I'm going to be a brand ambassador, and then the next step in the ladder is trade marketing, and then I'm running the show. No, look, stick to what you're good at, know what you're good at, and just shine.
Right.
Double down on your strength. Easier said than done. Yeah, just double down. Don't try and be something you're not. And again, if I had to have a conversation with myself a few years ago, is don't overcomplicate things. Don't try and be something you're not. It was a weird. I suffered a little bit of imposter syndrome when I was coming up, because a lot of people were like, oh, he was just a bartender. He's just a bartender. Even today, people like, oh yeah, can you still do the crazy tricks? And me a few years ago, I'd be like, oh no, I don't do that anymore. But me now, I'm like, yeah, I can do that.
Right.
Look at me, I don't care. It's part of. I've got nothing to prove. But yeah, so it's just do what you love and be passionate about it. Yeah.
Do you think that comes with age?
I do. I think there's a certain insecurity that comes with experience, and not necessarily just age either. It's experience and trusting yourself.
Right. True. Yeah. Because I feel that again, I think that when we're up and coming, or when we get the opportunities, we really want to prove ourselves, right? And I think not only to others, but internally, right? Like I want to, to your point, that I want to make sure that everybody knows that I can do it. I think where I'm at in my role is I know what I can do. I know what I can't do and what I need to work on. And it's, I think self-awareness comes with, again, experiencing, knowing like, you know what, like, I need to focus a little bit more on, you know, off-premise, on whatever it is, right? Because we come from the on-premise side. I think it's a little bit of self-awareness. And again, experience obviously is not something that we can educate or communicate on. It's something that, you know, these guys will have to go through. But I mean, just knowing that even if you expect to know everything that, you know, the next guy, you know, 10 years that has 10 years of experience above you, even like, I think for you to know if you're, you know, mid-20s and you get this part-time ambassadorship, I think this is where you grow. This is where you make, you know, mistakes, hopefully not, you know, horrible mistakes, but, you know, like mistakes that you could come back from, right? This is where you grow. This is where you get that experience for then, you know, in 5-10 years from now, for you to be extremely aware of the things that you can do and, you know, teach others in a sense.
Yeah. And to your point as well, being aware of it is fine, but you have to be willing to do something about it as well.
True.
And address it. Like, you take the time, sign up for that Excel course, like do the things that you're lacking. The resources are out there, and then for the most part, people are out there that are going to help you as well. And that gives you a lot of credibility. If you're one of those people that can put your hand up and say, "Hey, listen, I want to get better at doing this. Can you help me?" Most people are going to say yes, and you'll get credit for that as well, like that interaction. I know in the past that I've benefited from that massively, and I have a few mentors. They're still mentors to this day because of that interaction.
Wow. Yeah, and speaking of that mentorship too, I feel like, you know, Songha is like, you know, the one that comes to mind, right? I feel like you guys work very closely together. It seems, again, just assuming, it seems that you've really sort of taken him and sort of, you know, maybe shared a little bit of your experience and educated him in any sense. Is that wrong?
I don't want to take any responsibility for something. No, so Songha is an interesting, I hope he doesn't mind me giving him a shout out and telling the story. So I met Songha when I was with the Bowls Company and I just moved to the US. He didn't speak a word of English, and he was at the Bowls Bartending World Championship, the Bowls Around the World competition, and he was one of the finalists. And it was a great group of people from all over the world. And my role as an ambassador was to help, you know, host them in the city, make sure everybody got out of bed on time, got to the show on time, did what they needed to do, and also build relationships. I say that in jest, but really, you know, these guys were pros. And a few months after the competition finished, Songha put on like a private Facebook group that whole group had. Hey, listen, I'm looking for opportunities. I want to get out of. He was in Tokyo at the time. He's Korean, but he was working in Tokyo.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, I might have something for you. And at the time, there was a project going on downtown here in Las Vegas.
Oh, nice.
And because I'd been through the visa process before, I kind of had the familiarity. I knew the lawyer, so I recommended the lawyer for the business and say, this is kind of how it's going to work. You still have to do all the work, but this is how it's going to go. I believe that he could, because he's clearly one of the best in the world. He's at World Championships. He could qualify for this visa. So he went and he applied for it, and you know, he got it, obviously. And and then the rest is history. But he's a very close family friend as well. I consider him. I went to Korea with him and saw his family as well. So
that's awesome.
He's coming up, and I'm honored to call him a friend.
So what did you originally saw in him? Like what sort of, you know, either talent or, you know, again, like, and the reason why I'm asking is for a bartender to know that we are within reach, right? I mean, I think anyone that I've met in the supplier side, you know, has something to be grateful for, and we always like to give back. So we're within reach. But you know, something that I've asked also Nate Green is, what do you see in someone that has the qualities or the fundamentals to then, you know, be mentored or, you know, educated, or, you know, what was it like specifically that, you know, maybe a bartender could work on for them to be mentored? Yeah.
So, I mean, the people that, you know, I see being successful now all share common traits. Is they're driven. They've got the passion, and they're just confident in themselves that they can get stuff done. Now, some people, if you get to meet Songha, again, good example, right? You'll see him around at night. He's very, you know, loosey-goosey. He's no, I don't mean this in a bad way. He's just settled. He's himself. Yeah. He's got really nothing to prove. But if you put him into a competition setting, or he has to do work and he has to do something, he's working and he's got his game face on and he's going to do whatever's asked of him to make himself look good and make whoever's asked him to do it look good.
Right.
So that's a common trait as well. Is you know, if call time's at 11, he's there at 10:45. If and this is a common for everyone. This is not just me throwing traits. Like if you do what you say you're going to do, and then go and do it is I guess a McGregor line, but it rings very true. And that's what when we were recruiting with Campari, a lot of the guys that have done very well have gone on to other things or are still with Campari. Those are the ones that have that trait.
Yeah,
they figure stuff out. They get it done. They don't need a hand holding. They don't have a million questions. And if they do have questions, they're intelligent questions that will help them get the job done. So, yeah, that's kind of what I look at as a baseline of success, and that's a habit. You have to train that. Nobody's born with that.
Right.
You have to work at that.
Yeah, I mean, constantly practice, right? Yeah, for sure. I think that just even the fact that he created that again, just using it as an example, we'll stop using it as an example, Songha. Just the fact that he created that.
It's the Songha podcast.
Yeah, just the fact that he created that private Facebook group and asked the question. My thing is take the initiative, right? Like I don't enjoy when somebody asks the questions and they haven't sort of even started that process. As he put it out there, he took the initiative, and something came from it.
Yeah, and there's a risk factor there as well. He wasn't so. I mean, I compare it to my story, right? I gave up what at the time was everything to move to a country that I didn't speak the language. Now, granted, in the Netherlands they do speak English as well, so I wasn't completely awash. But that's a big risk to take, and you have to be confident in your abilities to make it work. And as Song is another good example. He left Japan and didn't speak a word of English, nothing. And he came here and he figured it out. His English is still not great, by the way.
But it's much better.
Yeah, it's much better. Sure. No, I joke. No, and when you think about that, there's these people that do very well tend to share that trait of willing to take the risk and go backwards. I remember because I was working on the Strip I was in a flair bar, and we were inside Circus, and people kind of can say, well, Circus, but I mean that occupancy in that hotel is always really high, and at the end of the day, getting 100 $1 tips is way better than getting 2 or 3 $20 tips, right? So we were always busy. We made a ton of money. It was easy 8-hour shifts. You clock in, clock out, and when I first took a full-time position as a brand ambassador, I had to have a serious conversation with my wife. We just had a kid, and it was so my daughter was born, and we were going to cut our household income drastically because she was planning not to work, and it was it was a big decision to take, and financially it was a big risk. Now I don't regret it, but at the time it was
right. It's a risk nonetheless, right?
Yeah, and you have to, that's what I mean by confidence. It's not arrogance. It's just like I can figure this out. I know I've got the skills to get this done. And look beyond what you're doing now and think about how it progresses you in the future.
True. Yeah, I think, that the risk being worth the reward sort of thing. And I mean, to your point, even a good union, well-paid, busy establishment for something that could be, I think, honestly, for me is also having the confidence to know that if something goes wrong, I can rebuild, right? Like, because I consider myself a bit of a dreamer in a sense that positivity, and I always sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel, but I also am confident with myself, my work ethic, my commitment to know that if for whatever reason something were to go wrong, I can rise above it. So, again, it's not arrogance. It's just, you being prepared to put in the work to get you there, basically.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's no, I get asked a lot, like, any tips and tricks to get where you are? Is like, do work. It's not, and be disciplined. So, and enjoy yourself as well. You got to have fun with it, right? So, I like, you'll see me out and about having drinks and enjoying company of people. But again, when it's game time, I'm ready to go, and we're working, and things are gonna happen. So, yeah, it's funny being disciplined and stuff. I've already got my next project in the pipeline, so when things, things might change with Q, who knows? So you got to have a backup plan all the time. I've never gone into any position in my in my professional career without plan B ready to go.
Wow.
So, and that takes work as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And that's not saying anything wrong. It's just, it's an insurance policy essentially.
Yeah, of course. Just like anything else in life, you just want to, health insurance. Like, you always want to protect yourself and your family. So now on building brands, small brand, and obviously you work with a little bit of everything. Is there any advice that you can share on the difference between having it working for a brand that has been on for years to building a brand, and what that difference may be for somebody wanting to take a role in that either one?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at startups and certainly emerging brands, you're going to have a multitude of skills, right? So there's no template job description. Right. You're in at the deep end, start swimming, and people are like, oh, well, I don't do sales. It's like everybody does sales, everybody does marketing, everybody does something. Like so when you're with a smaller company, the expectation is that you're able to be flexible and you're able to think on your feet. Get things done quickly with limited resources. So it's kind of like being dropped special forces in the middle of nowhere with half your gear. You've got a team around you which you have to trust, and you've got an operation that needs to go down. But there's an element of figuring out. When you're with a larger organization, it's a slightly different thing because I learned this actually at Procter Gamble, not in the liquor world. Is the importance of staying in your lane and doing like your job very, very well will help you shine. Sounds boring, but really. And if you're an entrepreneurial kind of person that likes to hustle, think about that, because you're going to be given a very specific set of tasks that you have to execute on time, and communicate it to the right people. 80% of your job is going to be internal and external communication about how good you are. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
These organizations are huge, and they have to operate in that function to steer the ship. It's not going to take one rudder. You need to. That's
the best way to describe those, because it's true. And again, to an up and coming bartender, or if you're a junior ambassador, I think ask yourself what internally you're willing to do. Again, whether you want to be flexible and do everything that the business needs in order for the business to succeed, or do you want to be a line worker per se in a huge, chain supply, which honestly, my experience, I was able to, I use that as a safety net, because with a large company, you're able to grow, you're able to learn at your own pace, if you will, without being thrown into, the sharks essentially. And, as you said, special forces, that's so true, because your resources are very, very limited. So I think in a sense, depending on who you are, obviously we're all different. In a sense, you might want to have a little bit more experience when you go into special forces, but not to say that you can't succeed, not having that experience.
Every job can't be fixed with a screwdriver, right? So you need different skill sets inside of an organization, and you need different skill sets as an individual to thrive, right? Yeah. And if you think about, again, go back to the Procter Gamble example, when I first got recruited, they took all of the new hires to Antwerp, right? So a bunch of people from different universities, different backgrounds that were working in as scientists, the entry-level scientists that came in, for the whole of Europe, went to Antwerp. And, this is the first time I ever got given a company card. I got the company Amex. And I was like, whoa, this is going to be awesome. Everyone else had a fear about it. And we got to Antwerp and we did all the onboarding stuff during the day. And then we had dinner. And of course, there's like a nighttime activity. And it just so happened that there was a club down the road that I knew one of the bartenders at. So I'm like, hey guys, we got, do you want to take it a little bit further tonight? Me being me. And so I send out some text messages. And of course, we're like front of the line. I'm with like a group of 12 of us. And I run up this huge bill in this club for the group of us. And, everybody else the next morning is like, oh, I'm going to be in so much trouble. This is really bad. And I'm like, I probably took it a little bit too far. And sure enough, when we got back to Egham, back to London to do the debrief and everything else, the photos come out, and it's just a bunch of standard photos in the convention center and stuff. And then the night the photographer was out with us in the night, and then the photos were great. It was like a team building exercise and stuff. And I realized, I think that night, that I was just cut from a different cloth to these people, because everybody else was terrified that they were going to get in trouble, and could very well have got in trouble as well.
It could have gone either way.
There was no guarantees that I wasn't going to get 86, still not allowed on the flight on the way home, but I was willing to take the risk, and in the moment, it just seemed like the right thing to do. So, I remember being told, like, don't do it again, but we appreciate the effort. So, and I think that's when I realized, it was like, this is not the people I want to be surrounded by. And again, they were doing a very good job, specific job. Going forward, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all. Well, and again, maybe it's exactly what they were looking for, right? It's just not necessarily what you were looking for, or what you saw yourself thriving in.
And nobody had a bad time,
Right, that's true. Yeah, that's awesome. And the last thing I want to touch on, you actually talked about it a little bit, but if there's anything that you can tell yourself, if you could go back in time and tell yourself, what would that be?
No, like this is a difficult one, because where do you draw the line, right? Where's the inception point or the inflection point? I think, don't overcomplicate things. There's a classic saying, the simple answer is often the right one. So if you've already come up with a solution to something, just do that, and then repeating myself, have passion for what you do what you love doing. Otherwise, it's just going to be a toil. And to work is hard. Like in this industry, it is hard. There's a lot of things you have to balance, and there's a lot of things you have to balance yourself, you have to balance your family, you have to balance, your career progression. It's not easy. The whole time, the world is, this world is trying to, beat you down and take something from you. So I think I would definitely say to myself, listen, don't take it too seriously, don't try too hard, and don't overcomplicate it. Just stick to what you're good at, be confident, and be yourself. It doesn't mean be lazy. It means, go out and do what you think you do, but don't be so hard on yourself. Don't beat yourself up.
Yeah. And if you're just starting on, in this role also, I mean, I think that, just know that, nobody was crushing it right after 6 months. It takes some time for you to learn, whether you got the job or you're going to get the job. Just know, like, that first year, just try to learn as much as you can. Obviously, double down on your strengths. But, one thing that you touched on, being a father as well, you don't necessarily think about it when you come into the role if you were not a father when you came onto the supplier role. I never thought about how was I going to balance family life and work life, because at the time, work life was really just everything life. I had. Yeah. So I think it's something that we don't necessarily think about. And obviously, our superiors and as we continue growing, again, the work, the travel, all these things demand a little bit more. And it's probably when you want to be with your family a little bit more too.
Yeah. I mean, today, selfishly, I'll give you an example, live example. Yesterday, so right now I'm on the West Coast. I have to be in Arizona for Arizona Cocktail Weekend. I will be in Vibe, which is a national account conference in San Diego next week. And, obviously I was here in Vegas, so I have some things to do here, including your podcast. And I had to go quickly to Carlsbad yesterday. Now, I could have just jumped on a flight, done the training that I was going to do, spent the night in a hotel and came back. But I was like, no, I've got my family here in town. I had enough air miles. We flew in together. Monique's doing a wonderful job. It's my wife, working with a brand, and they support her coming out and helping them. So I decided yesterday, I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to get on that flight. I'm going to go do the training. I'm going to pack my bags. I'm going to rush back to the airport and take a flight back on the same day, so I can be with them for another night before they go back home tomorrow. So you have to be, and that was for me maybe an 18-hour day. All in all, and I still have to do all my regular work as well. It's not like I'm just chilling out on a plane either. Eating pretzels. No, it's real work. So you have to be willing to do those things and make those things happen. And yes,
I think making being willing to make the sacrifices that you need to make. I mean, my thing is, I can leave the night before, or I could, I love tucking my kids into bed, so I could wake up at 4 a.m. Lose a little bit of sleep and then get right into work. I don't have the luxury or, of getting in the night before, getting a good sleep and then sort of going on to, a work or whatever. I much rather sacrifice a little bit of sleep and push through the day just so I could spend that time with my family. So, I mean, again, for those of you young single people, you don't necessarily understand that, but just keep this in mind, because again, as you continue growing in your career, in your profession, there's a lot of things that I think time management, that's like what it comes down to at the end of the day. How do you manage the time with work, productivity, with your family, and your personal hobbies too, because all these things are going to make you a better professional overall.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's for another episode, but I mean, being married to somebody that has a similar position or in the trade, I can't even imagine the juggling that you guys do.
Yeah, it's real, but I'm blessed. So
yeah.
I'm with somebody very special. So
awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. Shout out Monique.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you very much. Is there anything you want to add?
No. Just I hope everyone gets something out of this, and really. One thing to remember is you're going to make mistakes, but this is how you rebound. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, and don't be afraid of challenging yourself. Because if you don't, you'll stay where you are.
Yeah, I agree. Where could the guys find you, guys and gals find you on Instagram, social? So
my Instagram is at Anthony Pullen. Very simple. I think I jumped on it early. There's not very many of us around, maybe. And you can find me just on Instagram.
Perfect.
And coming to a bar near you, I guess.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. Cheers.